Okay, welcome to 10 minutes 2, and this topic is all about why phonics is not necessarily the best way to teach someone who has dyslexia how to spell or to read. I know this is going to be really controversial. I know a lot of people will probably get very upset with this. However, it is actually the truth. I've been doing this for over 13 years. I've been helping people for over, 22 years in terms of success strategies. And in 2010, when I was working with a cohort of about 40 children who had dyslexia in a secondary school, I then met an amazing woman who is dyslexic herself, and she actually showed me how she had overcome her dyslexia, and from then on I was absolutely obsessed. I wanted to know what was it that I didn't know, that if I understood that, I could then help children, adults, teens, etc. with dyslexia and actually help them to learn really successfully. So I'm going to attempt in the next 10 minutes, different videos, all counting up to 10 minutes, to basically convince you that a more visual system is actually more practical, it's more effective, it's faster, and guess what? It can even be fun too. So I'm Sara Haboubi, I'm from Jumpstarting Learning Skills, and I hope to see you in the next few videos. Okay, so this is video 2 of my 10 minutes 2, and what I want to explain is, first of all, about language and about words. So the written word is in fact a technology. If you look at things like hieroglyphics and maybe languages like Japanese or Chinese, etc., that are much more pictorial, yes, some of the words do look like the subject or the object or the creature or whatever it is they're actually discussing. However, if you look at English and anything that uses our alphabet, or even the Russian alphabet or whatever it is, what you'll actually find is that the words don't look anything like the actual thing that they're describing. So the word cat, for example, doesn't look like a cat. It's a technology. It was an invention. It was a way of taking the spoken word, the sounds that we were making, and actually have another format for those to be communicated. So words are all about information. They're all about communication. They're not just about sounds. So if you think about that, we then have to understand that actually we don't have a specific part of the brain that is dedicated just for the written word. I'll explain in the next video. Okay, so what is a word? A word has 3 components. What's called the orthographic component, which is how it's spelled, the phonological component, which is how does it sound, and the semantic component, which is what does it mean. Now, of course, the semantic component can be incredibly complex. A word like thoroughly doesn't just mean a word by itself, it has to be in a context. It has other words around it in order for that word to actually make sense. We have other words, which we call concrete nouns, which on their own actually make sense. So that would be a person, an object, a creature, or a colour. Those things can pretty much be self-explanatory. So when it comes to context, obviously our brain has a lot of work to actually do. Now, those 3 aspects of a word, those 3 components, actually match fMRI scans that are done of people's brains when they're reading. Okay, I'll explain that in the next video. Okay, so what scans actually show when people are reading is that there are 3 parts to the brain that actually light up, mainly on the left side of the brain. We have an area around here which is called the Broca's region. That is all to do with pronunciation. How do you actually, even if you're reading in your head, this part of the brain actually lights up. We have an area around here which is called the parietal temporal region, and that's all about the word analysis. What does the word mean? And another part of the brain, which is between that and the occipital lobe, which is called the occipital temporal region, that essentially is about how the word looks. It's the visual. So the occipital region, which is right at the back of the brain, that is actually our visual center. Now, studies in Georgetown University actually showed that we don't quickly decode, so that's the segmenting and blending words together when we're reading, when we're a fluent reader. What we're actually using is that visual recognition, and it's got to be really, really quick. So fluent readers are not segmenting and blending. Fluent readers are recognizing the word visually. So an interesting thing that happened with the work of Sally Shaywitz, she wrote a book called Overcoming Dyslexia, was that the fMRI scans of the fluent reader, yes, it showed these 3 parts of the brain lighting up, but the really interesting work actually showed that those with dyslexia, when they were reading, only the front part of the brain was lighting up. Now, why is that significant? Well, it's significant because it means that they're not using their visual system to recognize words. What they're trying to do is essentially pronounce the words. That doesn't include the meaning or the visual recognition. This will make a lot of sense if you have a child who is struggling or students who are struggling with dyslexia, because often what can happen is they can decode the word correctly. They can segment and they can blend. So you break it down and then you put it back together again. So they might be able to do that. However, on the next line, they might have the same word and yet for some reason they don't recognize it. So it's almost as if they're constantly using the front part of the brain, which is all about novel information, instead of actually using their memory, the long-term memory. This is really, really vital because it means that for rapid automatic naming, that fluent reading, that is going to be very, very difficult if they're not transferring the word as they've decoded it, segmented and blended it successfully into the visual, so the next time they see it, they immediately recognize it. Now, this is really, really crucial. We know that successful spellers see words inside their mind's eye. Now, I know there are some people out there who suffer from something called aphantasia, which is the inability to see inside the mind. I'm not going to be talking about that because that's about 3 or 4% of the population. I'm talking about those who can visualize. However, what they're not doing is they're not using that visual system actually for words. It even actually translates into numbers and etc. But I'll talk about that in another set of videos. So let's just concentrate on words for a moment. I want you to just try this yourself. If you're a good speller, or not, I want you to think about, I'm going to say a word and I want you to notice, can you see that word inside your mind's eye? Okay, ready? Okay, the word is penguin. Okay, what happened? You might have seen a creature, you might have seen the actual penguin itself, you might have seen the word. If you don't know how to spell it, what were you trying to do? Where would you find that word other than obviously if you were going to try and Google it or use your dictionary? What happens when you can spell a word, when you understand how to do it very well, and when you're struggling? Just notice what actually goes on inside your head. And the question is this: could you spell successfully without being able to see the word inside your mind's eye? Another aspect, particularly about the English language, is the fact that this is not a phonetic language, okay? About 50% of words might be spelt through how they sound. But that's not the whole story with English. We have 44 sounds that we make when we speak. They're called phonemes. We only have 26 letters in the alphabet though. So in order to create those 44 sounds from those 26 letters, we actually have 250 plus, in fact, people argue it could be as much as 1,000, as many as 1,000 different ways to actually spell those 44 sounds. That means that we've got things like silent letters, we've got homophones, words that sound the same, but are spelt differently and have a different meaning. We've got heteronyms, those are words that are spelt the same, but are pronounced differently with a different meaning. I'll give you an example of heteronyms. Words like wound and wound, they're spelt the same, but they obviously have a different meaning and a different pronunciation. Envelope and envelop, refuse and refuse. You get the idea. So actually in English, we have a very complex relationship between the words, the spelling and the meaning. So you cannot just come in through the phonological door. You can't just come in through segmenting and blending, particularly for spelling in English. You have to be able to see the word. And often those words are described as tricky words. Now, they're not tricky if you can see them inside your mind's eye, are they? So I'm going to end my video on one last thing, which is my bugbear around synthetic phonics programs. Not all of them, and I think some of them may have even dropped this at this stage, but they sometimes use something called non-words. So these are words that to test the phonological ability to decode, that the child's ability, can they decode the sounds? Now I want to take an example of the letters O-U-G-H, okay, O-U-G-H. Now, in and of themselves, they don't mean anything, but if you put a different letter in front of that, it's going to change the pronunciation of O-U-G-H. For example, if you put a B in front of it, that becomes bow. If you put a C in front of it, it becomes cough. If you put a D in front of it, it becomes dough. If you put an R in front of it, it becomes rough. T, tough. TH, though. THR, through. You get the idea. O-U-G-H, the pronunciation of those letters together will change depending on the letters or the letter in front of it. So testing children with non-words in English, I think, is pretty cruel. And I would like to ask teachers to actually stop doing that. English is complicated enough. So I want to thank you for my very first 10 minutes too. I'm not sure I quite made it in 10 minutes, but let's just see how I got on. So if you'd like to know more, you can actually check out the link inside the bio. I'm running a course starting today for parents. It's 6 weeks. You can have a look at it, go to my website, you can see a bit more about it, and I'm always happy to do a call as well. There's a link to do a free 20-minute consultation if you'd like to understand more how you can help your child, or if you're a teacher, how you can help your students more. Have a great day.